Welcome to this next episode of So That Reminds Me, Reminder Publishing's bi-weekly podcast discussing Western Mass news. I'm Chris Mazza.
And I'm Tyler Garnett.
And we'll be your hosts for today's episode. Now, today's episode, we're doing something a little bit differently. We're actually recording this remotely, kind of on the fly, so please bear with us if there are any technical or sound issues that we're kind of learning on the fly here. So I appreciate you bearing with us. And Tyler, I appreciate you being able to still pull through and do this. Guys, Tyler is literally playing hurt right now.
Yeah, Chris said it perfectly. I'm thankful for him kind of rolling with the punches. I tried to give him my best shot this morning, but unfortunately for me, at the ripe age of 24, playing in a slow-pitch softball league last night, tried rounding third, I guess a little bit too fast, and not one, but both of my hamstrings decided to pull on me simultaneously. I face-planted and dove right into third base, and laid there for a couple of minutes, realizing that just something did not feel right. What made it a little bit worse was everything happened so fast that after I stood up, not realizing how bad they were, next guy got a base hit into left field. I had to attempt to score, did not make it there because could not really walk as nice as I would have liked on my own. So it was definitely a low moment at the time, but definitely something funny that I'll be telling many people.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to laugh, but especially this in the juxtaposition with the Olympics going on and athletic excellence. It's just I can't help but chuckle. Outside of this, how have you been?
Besides that small injury last night, things have been going pretty well. It's fine to laugh about this. That's what I've been telling everybody because it's a good story to tell. But, things are going good. Cooled down a little bit outside, so I've been able to enjoy the weather a little bit better without sweating and worrying about the humidity.
Yeah, I got to tell you, this has been a pretty busy time on my end. Not simply. I was overseeing a charity event that took place last weekend, so that took up a whole bunch of my time. And then on the other end, in exactly a week now, I am going to be heading on vacation. So there's been a lot going on this end. So I'm glad we were able to figure out a way to make this work today. We're recording this on Wednesday, July 31st for our August 2nd edition. I think I've got all those dates correct.
Sounds good to me.
So I'm really excited that we're able to make this work today. And with that, let's get into some of the interesting topics that are happening in Western Mass that we're going to be talking about. We have Southwick is facing problems along the shore of North Pond. Multiple health centers and nursing homes are facing criticism. The Springfield School Committee approved a new attendance policy. Kamala Harris visited Pittsfield for a fundraiser, and Hockey Day in Springfield returns to the area this weekend. And we'll get into those after a couple of short messages.
Would you like to put your products and services before more than 2,500 potential customers in just one day? That's what a booth at the Prime Living Senior Expo can do for your business. If your goal is connecting with consumers age 50 plus, let the Prime Living Senior Expo help you reach this exploding market. To book your space for September 8th from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. in MGM's Aria Ballroom, contact your sales representative or visit primelifeexpo.com. We get it. You're busy, but you want to be connected to your local community. If you're not reading The Reminder, Western Mass's free weekly newspaper, you're missing out on the heartbeat of your town. Stay in the loop with all the latest buzz, from local stories to community updates and exciting events. It's all in The Reminder. Just log on to thereminder.com and dive into the hometown news you love. To subscribe to receive The Reminder at your home, call 413-788-1316. Don't miss a beat. Your town, your stories, your community for over 60 years. The Reminder. We are hometown news.
And we're back For our first topic, we discuss a wild situation taking place in Southwick, which has caused the Select Board to temporarily close the parking area at the North Pond Conservation Area. An increased number of complaints about improper activities at the North Pond Conservation Area over the last few months has temporarily closed the parking area, and the Conservation Committee is considering options to reduce the people using it for active, not passive, recreation. The town purchased a 61-acre property, which includes the last undeveloped shoreline of North Pond, in 2019. The $4 million cost was borne by local taxpayers, as well as the Franklin Land Trust and the state's Division of Fisheries and Wildlife.
Now, the article included a social media photo taken by an unidentified Congamon Lake property owner showing a beach party on July 13th in the North Pond Conservation Area, which is supposed to be reserved for passive recreation such as hiking and fishing. An incident on July 13th began as a group of people who had been spending the afternoon along the shore of North Pond were starting to leave the conservation area. Cell phone recordings shared widely on social media show people dancing in the parking lot, accompanied by what social media users described as very loud music. Several men who lived in the area had reportedly asked the group several times to lower the volume, only to have it turned back up later, according to witnesses who spoke during the Select Board meeting on July 15th. The last time the men approached the group about the music, a fight broke out between the revelers and the neighbors. The brawl was recorded on a cell phone and posted anonymously on Facebook. It's not clear in the video who threw the first punch, but several members of the partying group are shown sucker punching at least two of the neighboring men and kicking another in the head.
At least two of the men were injured, but refused medical treatment after EMTs arrived, according to police. When the Select Board met on July 15th, 2 days after the brawl, residents filled the town hall conference room during the public comment period, and nearly every speaker urged the board to shut down the area until a solution was found to reduce the number of people visiting and flouting the rules. Completely shutting down the conservation area would violate the restriction placed on the property by the state when it helped fund the purchase in 2019. Select Board member Douglas Moglin and resident Joanne LeBlanc said residents need to read the conservation restriction on the property, which only allows passive recreation like hiking, hunting, trapping, fishing, birdwatching, or snowshoeing, and mandate that it is to be open at all times to the general public.
Now, the board voted unanimously to temporarily close the conservation area's parking lot and ban parking for at least a half mile in both directions along South Longyard Road. The Select Board also planned to meet on July 22nd to continue the discussion. One option they discussed on July 15th was to make the parking ban along South Longyard Road permanent and to reduce the size of the parking area. So it seems like there are a couple of issues here. Obviously, the first one is people are using this area for uses that are not allowed.
Yeah.
And then the second one is there's some issues in terms of making sure that you're in trying to prevent those people from breaking the rules. You're not breaking the rules yourself by closing down the area.
Yeah, no, I think that's the hardest part about it is, it's unfortunate that usually in most cases it takes just a few people to not follow the rules to kind of ruin it for everybody else. Because I'm sure this area is beautiful and, many people probably use it for hiking and its intended purposes. But I know from the picture in the article, people were partying on the lake. There was some garbage getting, thrown in the lake as well, and just seems to be disturbing the, nearby neighbors as well.
Yeah, and I think that the biggest issue here is the purpose here is conservation. Mm-hmm. So this is absolutely flouting that purpose when you are hosting parties and using it for those kinds of activities. Now, I understand it's been hot. You're trying to find a place where you can have people gather and be able to enjoy the pond, etc. But don't do it in an area that is specifically mandated that is not allowed. I think the real struggle here for the town and other entities that may be involved is how do you police this all the time? And I don't know enough about the history of this to know if this is something that has constantly been a problem or if this is a new problem and it just became this big of a problem because there was a fight. But it seems like it would be difficult for local law enforcement with their limited resources to consistently police this. And is this something that local police would even police? Or is this something that, because of other things that are involved, like the Division of Fisheries and Wildlife, is this a state issue? How does all that work? I don't know. So I think that is it seems like the select board is trying to figure out what they can do locally to kind of curb this a little bit. But if people are doing this in an area where you're not supposed to do that anyway, I really don't think a no parking sign is going to stop.
Yeah, that was my first thought as well. It seems like the typical putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound kind of thing, as if they needed to just slow down the incidents for now. Obviously putting a parking ban alongside Long Yard Road, reducing the size of the parking lot may reduce the amount of people that go there. I mean, there's definitely ways to get around that. You can carpool, you can Uber there, walk there if you're close enough. I'm not sure exactly how close residents are to this area, but obviously it becomes a bigger situation when you have a group of men getting into a altercation, a physical fight, and a few being pretty badly beaten up over a situation that, if everyone just kind of listened to the rules a little bit, probably could have been avoided.
So for our next topic, we are going to discuss the recent news with Highview of Northampton and Pioneer Valley Health and Rehabilitation Center in South Hadley. Highview of Northampton has seen a high number of fines and flagged deficiencies over the past 3 years. One of the most fined facilities in Massachusetts by the federal government during the same time, it has also not met state standards for registered nurse hours and is above the national average in health citations. The 120-bed facility is owned by Athena Healthcare Systems.
Highview has become the most fined nursing home in all Western Massachusetts and has received the 9th highest total federal fines across the state over the last 3 years, according to data from the U.S. Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, who has also given the facility a 1-star rating. Both Vantage at Wilbraham and Pioneer Valley Health and Rehabilitation in South Hadley is also on the list. The facility has seen a number of problems over the last 3 years. Currently, it ranks in the bottom 2% of facilities based on performance data kept by the State Executive Office of Health and Human Services. The company is currently under an agreement with the Attorney General's office after a state investigation alleged it provided poor care for people with substance use disorder at multiple facilities, including Highview. Other recent reports have claims from individuals in these facilities about poor conditions. In total, the facility has been fined $363,000 by the federal government in the last 3 years.
Vantage Health and Rehab of Wilbraham has experienced similar issues. The Wilbraham facility has received $361,000 in fines, according to the reports from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Its most recent report, which was dated June 27, 2023, listed $23,640 in fines and 12 deficiencies, including a failure to, quote, secure unattended medications, end quote, and have a registered nurse on duty for required weekly hours. The facility is rated, quote, much below average, end quote, at 1 star by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, which includes its registered nurse hours per resident per day at 12 minutes compared to the state average of 40 minutes, and 12 health citations compared to the state average of 11.8.
Now, the Pioneer Valley Health and Rehabilitation Center in South Hadley, currently operated by Blue Point Healthcare, has been the subject of allegations and evidence of misconduct. Issues have persisted for 5 months following the change in ownership to Blue Point Healthcare. South Hadley nursing home employees said they have faced numerous problems, including bounced checks, understaffing, limited resources, and unpaid wages. The situation has led to staff protests outside the facility, where they have highlighted their financial struggles and the inability to meet the patient's basic needs. Staff members allege they have gone unpaid for 4 weeks due to bounced checks, causing significant financial hardships and forcing employees to pay out of pocket for materials to care for patients. The workers also claim that severe staff shortages have forced employees to work over 60 hours per week, leading to extreme fatigue and fear among the staff. jeopardizing both employee well-being and resident safety. After a joint letter from State Senator Jake Oliveira and State Representative Dan Carey was sent to the Attorney General, Andrea Campbell, and Health and Human Service Secretary Kate Walsh, requesting their agency conduct a formal investigation. After the investigation, a Southwick Superior Court ruling placed Pioneer Valley Health and Rehabilitation Center under receivership.
I don't even know where to start with this. I mean, these seem to be places that they are prioritizing profits over people. Put point blank. I mean, this is unacceptable when you're talking about care of other human beings, that this is the level of service that you're providing for what is extremely expensive. I mean, people spend a lot of money to entrust other people to care for their loved ones in these facilities. And I don't, the people who are working in these facilities, I'm sure the vast majority of them are doing everything they can for these residents, and they're being hung out to dry by the ownership of these establishments. And it's just flat out sickening as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, those were the similar thoughts I had when I first read about not one, but 2, 3 different centers, kind of within Western Massachusetts, all kind of going on at the same time. And yeah, there's so many people that get affected. Obviously, you have to think about the resident themselves who check in or move in for a little while. That's got to be hard enough. Obviously, also the families and loved ones who, back them on the decision to, move them to a new center, as well as the staff who works there, not being able to care for the ones in the facility who they promised they would give the best care to. So it's really hard on top of anything else on multiple people, within the South Hadley one specifically. Obviously, most of them went without pay for a month, which is not easy, bills to pay, things to do, and then not having a lot of supplies within the center to be able to give them the best care. I know they were using things like pillowcases and anything they could really find to clean up things around there, which is just, sad to hear.
And there are 3 groups of people, I think, that are really sympathetic figures in this. The first is the residents themselves. Obviously, they're there for a reason, one way or another, whether they are trying to get well enough to go home again, or if this is, the plan for their final stage of life. They are in a situation where they don't have any control over the environment around them. And so there's the trust that's being put on the company that's going to be provided for them. And tying into that, the second one is the families of these residents and these patients who also don't have, as much as they may try to advocate for their loved ones, they don't have a lot of recourse other than going to their state senator and such, which is what this really is elevated to. And then the third is these people who are working in this facility who are doing their best to, and on, not getting paid in some cases, being told to do things that they, may not think are on the up and up, but they feel they have to do them, not only because they're afraid of losing their jobs, but sometimes they're like, if I'm not here to take care of these residents, then who is? Yeah. So there's a lot of issues here, and it seems that the vast majority of them fall on management, and shame on them for allowing this to be the case. There's no excuse for it whatsoever.
Yeah, it's definitely a disheartening situation, and I'm glad in these cases the state has stepped in to hopefully be able to mediate and kind of get things back to normal for a little bit, or help these centers heal everyone involved, because this is just sad to hear. That's the only words you can really think of.
Well, and it's sad that it has to get to the point of receivership in this case, and it doesn't seem like fines and negative scores are doing anything to impact these other facilities. You're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of fines, but if you're a multi-million-dollar company, you may just look at that as the cost of doing business, which is an awful way to do business, but it's unfortunately in a lot of cases that's the world we live in.
Yeah, that's just pocket change to them, too. Yeah, that's a good point. That's almost just a slap on the wrist. So, you really have to be able to step in and take control of things before it's too late for most of these cases.
And we'll be right back after another quick break.
Small businesses are the heartbeat of our communities, and at the first annual Go Local Marketplace, over 20 local makers will be bringing what they do best to brew practitioners for all to enjoy. From food trucks to live music and more, Go Local Marketplace will be your place to shop small with friends and family in tow. Go Local Marketplace will take place on Saturday, October 5th from 1 to 5 p.m. at Brew Practitioners in East Longmeadow. Parking and admission to the event is free. Bring your friends and family to Go Local Marketplace and enjoy the best of what our small business community has to offer.
Since the founding of Reminder Publishing over 60 years ago, the Reminder has brought local businesses together with their customers through our advertising and coverage. Over the past 4 years, the Reminder has been adding to its reporting and expanding our readership, while other newspapers in the region, state, and country have scaled back or closed. We want local community journalism to thrive and grow, and are asking our readers and listeners to support and participate. The Reminder Press Club's mission is to ensure that local journalism is sustainable and leading healthy community discussions. The Reminder Press Club is a way for you to support the crucial work of professional reporters covering the vital stories in our community. Learn more about the Reminder Press Club or join at reminderpressclub.com.
And we're back. For our third topic, the Springfield School Committee met on June 20th to approve policy changes designed to remove barriers to attending school. Chronic absenteeism has been a struggle for school departments nationwide over the past few years. Chronically absent is defined by the State Department of Elementary and Secondary Education as missed 10% of school days. A student who is not present for more than half of the school day is considered absent. With a 180-day school year, missing 18 days, or an average of 2 days per month, categorizes as someone who is chronically absent. Chief of Family and Community Engagement, Jose Escribano, pointed out that Massachusetts was the first state in the country to mandate schooling in 1852 and has been tracking attendance ever since.
The nationwide attendance problem has several contributing factors. Escribano said DESE has acknowledged a post-coronavirus pandemic spike in absenteeism. During COVID-19, families were told to keep children with illness home for 5 days, and that lesson took root. Escribano said if a student is out for 5 days with COVID and another 5 with a communicable infection like RSV, it adds up. School committee member Peter Murphy said 7,000 students in Springfield alone struggle with attendance issues. DESE doesn't distinguish between excused or unexcused absences, Escribano explained. Then Interim Superintendent Michelle Balch said the school department's attendance policy had been created in 2009 and was revised in 2011 and 2019. She said the department's internal team had met, quote, to ensure the policy was really reflective of the changes that needed to be made to be more responsive to the needs of students, end quote. Escribano said his team has worked with Bay State Health and the state's Department of Children and Families to sculpt the policy revision. Through input from Bay State Health, they learned that requiring a doctor's note after being absent is problematic. In an email to Reminder Publishing, Springfield Public Schools explained, quote, after much review, it was discovered that some doctors wouldn't give a doctor's note when asked, and others gave notes without even checking the child. This made things unfair because some families could get their absences excused while others couldn't. Also, state law doesn't mandate that families need a doctor's note when their child is sick. Instead, it allows simple notification to the school as sufficient. Escribano said the school department is meeting with families of chronically absent students to identify other barriers to attendance and help address them. For some students, one barrier might be traveling for sports. Hurst said, quote, Hurst being Denise Hurst, who's a member of the school committee. She said well over 100 kids traveled for non-school related sports last year. She noted that one school department in eastern Massachusetts changed their policy to be flexible with students who travel to play on sports teams. discussing buyback programs in which students are able to attend academic instruction for at least 4 hours outside of normal school hours to, quote, buy back the learning time they've missed, Escribano explained that after-school programs are not eligible. DESE considers the extra educational hours part of the same day of education. So I have some thoughts on this. And I'm going to preface this by noting that I am the spouse of an educator. Mm-hmm. With that said, these are my thoughts on this. This does not reflect any thoughts of anybody in the school department. It does not reflect any parents, except for me as a parent who has a child who is going to be going to Springfield schools as well. So with that said, I kind of find this ridiculous. Mm-hmm. I understand what their reasoning is, but this is not a way to combat absenteeism. It's not. This is not something that is going to improve attendance at school. It's making it easier for families to have the excuse to keep their kids out of school. It's removing a barrier that would keep their kids in school. If it's much easier for them to just say, hey, little Johnny's sick, and there's no check or balance in that, and you just take their word for it that little Johnny's sick, how is that helping keep those kids in school and getting the education that they're supposed to be getting? They identify these kids as chronically absent because if you're missing 10% of your school days, you're missing 10% of your education, and that's a problem. Mm-hmm. So I don't understand. Now, I understand from the standpoint of that this is a larger issue than Springfield, that based on this report and what we were told at the reminder, this falls in line with the state standard because the state doesn't differentiate and things like that. So this is a larger issue. And I don't understand how basically this adds an excuse. This makes everybody feel better about kids being absent as opposed to keeping kids in school. That's the way that I read this. And I don't understand how it can be read any other way. And we're also looking at things like, well, kids play sports that aren't attached to school, and so they miss school for that. That's not the point. That's an excuse for missing school. I understand that people play on teams that they have to travel and things like that. Mm-hmm. But it's building in excuses for missing school as opposed to delivering a strategy for keeping those kids from missing school. And that's my little rant on that.
Yeah, no, I agree with a lot of the points as well. I know absenteeism has been a problem. It's not just a Springfield problem. It's not just a Western Massachusetts problem, a Massachusetts problem. It's more of a nationwide problem. And it seems like it's one of those things that has just been a domino effect from the pandemic because it was easier to have remote learning, hybrid learning, stuff like that. I was going through college during the pandemic and I was able to take most of my classes online. If there was a hybrid option, instead of sometimes walking to class, I'll admit, I just took it online because it was the easier option. So it seems like the easier option has just kind of come out of the coronavirus pandemic. And in this case, the Springfield School Committee kind of thought the best way to make it look like they are working on addressing the problem was to have this new policy in place, which just seems like you're calling them excused absences, but they still almost seem excused. Like you said, I agree with the sports thing. I get other people play sports and have other things that come up, but that's still missing school. That's still missing precious times of learning a certain topic and learning things you need. So it's interesting to see Springfield do this, and it's interesting to see, what other schools may do if this really is the state standard and the other schools adopt this as well.
Now, one thing that I also dislike about this conversation is just like, well, we told people to stay home, so, that's what they're doing now. Mm-hmm. That was a very specific set of circumstances.
Yeah.
And there was a reason behind it, and there was scientific reasoning that explained why that was the approach, and that was the policy at that time. I don't understand why it's just like, well, that was the policy then, and that's what people got used to, so that's what we're doing. That was the policy for a very specific, very small amount of time, whereas for years before that, that wasn't the policy. So why is it just like, well, that's what happened there for this like year and a half portion of time. So why don't we just say, hey, that's, we've gotten past that now. We're going to go back to something that was more in line with what we were doing before. And there is an expectation that your kids come to school, and you can set up, yes, if a kid has a fever over 100, blah, 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 keep them at home. It's whatever. But this whole discussion that, well, this happened, and so now we're not going to, we're just going to roll with that because that's what people learn to do. It just doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't hold water. It's a confusing argument to me when it's just like, well, what about the, however many years before that? I mean, we've been talking about what the state, if we look back at the report, the state has mandated schooling since 1852 and has been tracking attendance ever since.
Yeah.
Now, I'm sure that the policies on that and everything have changed over the years, but since 1852, we've been saying, hey, kids need to go to school, and we're keeping track of who's going to school. Why now? Because something that happened. Now, granted, COVID was a big deal. I'm not trying to minimize COVID, but part of what we were doing at the time was to make it so that did not become the norm. So let's not make it the norm. Yeah.
No, it's a good point, and just kind of looking at the article as well, how do you feel about the potential for a buyback program? Just reading it quickly, it does seem like it's a way to make up the school. But would it come after the school day? Would it come on a Saturday? That's what I was just a little confused about.
So what they're saying here, if I'm understanding it correctly, is that they can't do it after school because that is still considered part of that school day. So you'd have to find time. Like the buyback programs would probably have to happen on weekends. They'd probably have to happen over vacations or over summers and things like that. I know that there are districts that do these buyback things. I believe that Holyoke is one that has a program like this. But the problem is you need to, on top of everything else, staff those programs and have funding for those programs. And so that's another hurdle there. The buyback thing is something that I can get on board with a little bit. And now I'm also someone who's not totally like, your kid can never be out of school or something like that. And it doesn't always have to be for illness, but just understand that if you take your kid on a vacation, now this could be like you're taking your kid, the one time you can take your kid to see the Grand Canyon is a time when they're going to be out of school, but that is a once in a lifetime opportunity. You as a parent do have the choice to do that, but you need to understand that there could be a ramification to that choice. And this seems to be going the other way. Like, well, we're going to, it's honestly placing less of an emphasis on the importance of attendance as far as I'm concerned. So I'm okay with programs like the buyback, like things like that. There are circumstances where, you want to give kids the opportunity when they have been chronically absent, the chance to reclaim their education. I have no problem with that. The question with those is, how are they funded? Where's the funding coming from? Are you going to be able to adequately staff them? Because on top of everything else, teachers and other educators, paraprofessionals, whatever, they don't have these same luxuries in terms of like just not showing up for work and, things like that. A teacher can't just, there's a very limited amount of time that teachers can take off during the school year, very limited. And people say, well, teachers, they get the summers off. Yeah, they're also not getting paid during the summer. Yeah. Even if they do get paid over the summer, they're stretching their school year pay over those months when they're not working. So I think that there are a lot of issues to this. I'm not saying that it's necessarily a black or white issue, a black and white issue. There's a lot of gray. There are a lot of instances where, people miss school for, whether it's quote unquote, an acceptable reason or not. But I feel like this move just facilitates kids missing school. I think it misses the mark.
Yeah, I agree as well. I think there will be plenty of kids who could easily forge a signature of a parent or something if they need a letter or something like that to say they're not feeling good or, have an excuse absence. So it definitely opens the door to a lot of different possibilities. For our next topic, Vice President and presumptive Democratic nominee Kamala Harris visited Pittsfield last weekend for a fundraiser, and staff writer Sarah Heinonen was there for the story. Harris announced her presidential campaign on July 21st, hours after Joe Biden announced that he would be withdrawing from the race following a heavily discussed debate against former President Donald Trump, the expected Republican nominee. On July 27th, the fundraiser also featured U.S. Senators Elizabeth Warren and Ed Markey, U.S. Representative Richard Neal, and former Governor Deval Patrick, with entertainment from cellist Yo-Yo Ma and musician James Taylor. The line of ticket holders wrapped around the block, with supporters waiting to get in to see their candidate. Across from the Colonial Theater, people lined South Street holding signs and cheering. Multiple residents expressed their opinions to Sarah, including Betty Bermart, who said it's nice for a little town for someone with such star power to visit. It's exciting. Vicky Bonning, who said she did not vote for Kamala in 2016, stood in line to enter the theater. This year, she said of Harris, she's our candidate. She's the only horse we have, and we're going to ride her to victory.
A 19-year-old Lennox resident who studies politics in Washington, D.C., said she was happy the Democratic event was in Pittsfield, adding that she was excited to vote in a presidential election for the first time. Many of the people on hand without tickets said they had only learned about the vice president's visit about a week beforehand. Plans for the event had been in the works since January. Still, with the tumultuous series of events that led to Biden's withdrawal from the race, Harrison's decision to run, and the assassination attempt of Trump on July 13th, Harris's presence in Pittsfield had been in question until just 2 days before the event.
Now, talking to some more people, Dalen Hamilton, Christine Hamilton, and Linda Kaufman were among those in the crowd hoping to see Harris arrive or leave the theater. Christine Hamilton said she was shocked Biden stepped down. Dalen Hamilton said she expected Biden to finish the campaign and step down after winning a second term. Of Harris taking up the mantle, Kaufman remarked, "I was shocked it happened so fast after Biden's announcement." Not everyone was unconditionally supportive, however. Amid the sea of Harris signs were a few people with signs of those supporting Trump or sporting gear with the former president's slogan, "Make America Great Again." Still, others arrived at the event to protest the Israel-Hamas war and the United States' financial support of Israel's military offensive in Gaza. The family was glad Harris came to Pittsfield. Jody Blessing noted they lived just 2 blocks away from the site, and Brielle Blessing said, "You never think someone so important would come here. It's exciting." So, just to kind of, without going into the politics of it, it's kind of interesting, kind of cool when I feel like someone like that comes and visits Western Massachusetts. It's always an exciting time for the community and surrounding neighborhood itself.
Yeah, and it's, it really is a momentous occasion when you do have someone of this political stature coming to this area. It doesn't happen very often. A lot of times, many of the influential lawmakers are in the Boston area, and a lot of the cash is in the Boston area. It does happen. We have seen some presidential candidates and such come through the area. I think that Richard Neal being part of his district certainly helps. But yeah, we've had, I'm trying to think off the top of my head, I think the last time that we had a really prominent and legitimate contender for president was Bernie Sanders a few years ago, did something at the Mass Mutual Center. But there is a history of Springfield being a campaign stop. It used to be more so, I believe. There was a time when JFK made an appearance in the 60s in Springfield, and that obviously was a very, very big deal. So it's certainly interesting. I mean, I think that this was obviously this was something that was in the works before she became a a presidential candidate, but having some of that stature in general on this end of the state is fairly rare and certainly notable.
Yeah, that's a good point too. I mean, Sarah mentioned that this was kind of in the works for months, and as she was not just, but in lack of a better word, just the vice president, she was going to take the visit. But after the last month of events, it was in question if you're still going to show up, and now she shows up with a little bit of a different role in a sense. Still, obviously, the vice president, but what is most likely going to be the candidate for the Democratic Party. So it makes it just even more interesting.
What I think is interesting about this area too, as opposed to, and I guess there's a little bit of supposition here, but from an outsider's standpoint looking in, it seems like we are more politically diverse in this area than, say, Eastern Massachusetts. Somebody can feel free to write to me and explain why I'm wrong, because like I said, I'm making a supposition there. But we're much more diverse in terms of the workforce. There's a lot of rural areas, and I think that makes it interesting for candidates, whether it's for a higher office like the presidency or otherwise, coming to Massachusetts. You really have to, I think, be, especially Western Massachusetts, I think you really have to be calculated in where you're going and who you're delivering your message to, and what that message is, because there is such a broad spectrum here in terms of political alignment. Yeah,
that makes sense too, and especially with the news coming so close, kind of to the election, the campaign tour has to be hot and heavy. So it's good to check out this area, and kind of lost in it, you get to see Yo-Yo Ma and James Taylor as well at this nice fundraiser. So you got quite a crew that came together at this thing, which was nice to see for Pittsfield.
And for our final topic, Hockey Day in Springfield will return to the Eastern States Exposition Fairgrounds on Saturday, August 3rd. Hockey Day in Springfield, which is sponsored by the Springfield Hockey Heritage Society, celebrates the long history of professional hockey in Greater Springfield, which started in 1926. The Springfield Indians, followed by the Kings, then the Indians again, the Falcons, and now the Thunderbirds, played in Springfield and at the Coliseum at the Big E Fairgrounds almost continuously throughout that time.
According to Lou Bordeaux, the founder of the society, thousands of players have cycled through Springfield and West Springfield, and a huge percentage of them ended up with NHL teams. Many of them remembering their Western Massachusetts roots and appear each year at Hockey Day, where players appear to sign autographs, take photos with fans, and tell stories. There will be auctions, giveaway, food for purchase, and merchandise for sale. Admission is $15 for members of the society and $18 for non-members. Tickets can be purchased at hockeyspringfield.org.
Now, this is a very cool event that I've been to before, and I don't know about you, but I'm a big hockey fan. And growing up in Springfield, I remember the Springfield Indians. I remember losing the Springfield Indians and then getting the Springfield Falcons and then losing the Springfield Falcons. And then, so now we have, and then getting the Thunderbirds. Springfield has a long history, and the AHL, the city of Springfield, is a charter city. And in fact, I believe the AHL offices are still located in Springfield. In fact, the Thunderbirds' current president, Nate Costa, was working in the AHL central office when he was hired for the job, leading the Springfield Thunderbirds. So I think that's been great in that he had some experience working around the league, and he was able to maximize a lot of the things that were successful in other areas and bring it to Springfield and make Springfield even more successful as a hockey community.
Yeah, I'm a big hockey fan myself. I obviously did not grow up in the Massachusetts Springfield area. Grew up in Long Island, no New York team. During my life have left. I know, obviously, the Dodgers and the Giants were teams that went out west. But Yeah, when you have a team and you kind of lose them, you still support them after years. I know I kind of just experienced that a little bit this past week or weekend. The Hartford Yorgoats had a Hartford Whalers night. The Hartford Whalers used to be a professional hockey team here in Connecticut until they relocated, took on a new name and new team. And, you always see the Whalers merchandise, the people walking around with their hats and their jerseys. And, there was a huge crowd at the game because you were able to show up early and get, autographs and pictures and merchandise and auctions just with players who used to play for the Whalers. So I imagine a similar response and a similar turnout for this event because I know people definitely still have that pride for their teams in Springfield, and I know that they're going to show up for it.
Yeah, it's funny. We really, as Springfield hockey fans, identify ourselves as Springfield hockey fans. We're not, we're not strictly Thunderbirds fans. We're, because there is a heritage that has continued. I think that there's a lot of pride that's taken in how long we've had professional hockey here. And there have been a lot of people who have helped make that happen. And I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't mention actually former Whalers goalie, I think back when they played in the WHA. So years ago, Bruce Landon, he saved hockey in Springfield when the Indians left. He ended up working with a former teammate who also still lives in the area. I believe he's still in the area, Wayne LaChance, and the two of them got an expansion franchise, and that's how the Falcons were born. And Bruce worked as, I believe he was president and general manager of the Falcons for years. He worked so hard to keep the Falcons here through some really bad economic times. And really, I think in a lot of ways, and Bruce and the Falcons walked so that Nate and the Thunderbirds could run because he kept it all alive. And honestly, at the end, the Falcons were the AHL affiliate for the Coyotes, and the Coyotes actually bought the team outright and moved them to Tucson. Now, which is a bit ironic given the Coyotes' issues with finding a home of their own. Anyway, that's getting further off topic. But so when you go to these things, you see there it runs the gamut in terms of people, what they remember. I mean, I remember my father remembers when the Springfield Kings won the Calder Cup. Obviously, I was nowhere near that time period, but I remember when the Indians won back-to-back Calder Cups. And so there's this connecting tissue, throughout whether one franchise to the next that is really great. And, I'll go to Thunderbirds games wearing an Indians shirt and, a Falcons hat because it's just like, we're Springfield hockey fans first, so I think that's really great. Sometimes people will say to me, I've got a couple of that I've gotten from the Hockey Heritage Society, like vintage Indians shirts.
That's cool. From
like their Coliseum days and stuff like that. And people say, "Oh, do you remember?" I'm just, how old do you think I am? But it's something that I think Springfield takes a lot of pride in the history as well as the current success of the team. I mean, they went to the Calder Cup finals just a couple of years ago, the Thunderbirds did. But people have this pride for the history as much as they do what's happening now.
Yeah, I think anyone who, lives in the area kind of takes on the pride of that team because, sometimes living in Massachusetts, you're not as close to certain teams you may root for, Bruins, Red Sox, Celtics, Patriots, things like that. But if you live in Springfield specifically and you were old enough to go to some of these times with the Indians, the Falcons, I'm sure you're interested to learn about it and remember specific moments. And if you live nearby, you definitely tell your kids about it who get interested in it. And then it just goes down the family tree of everyone's, remembering moments, having moments with different teams, especially if you're a fan of the sport. It's just an entertaining thing to do.
All right. Well, that puts a wrap on this episode of So That Reminds Me.
Thanks for listening, and we look forward to bringing you another episode in 2 weeks.
Thanks for listening to So That Reminds Me, produced by Western Massachusetts news source Reminder Publishing. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, find the latest news at thereminder.com, and follow Reminder Publishing on Instagram at Reminder Publishing, on X at The Reminder MA, and on Facebook. Reminder Publishing, we are hometown news.